welcome to the latest book forum. We have, of course, two distinguished speakers. One, the author herself, Ibu Dr. Nia Deliana, welcome, and Professor Faris Nur, also both from the Faculty of Social Sciences from this university. Um, Today, we will listen and understand a lot of connection and probably also disconnection between South Asia and Southeast Asia, historically especially. In which book, in this book, The Ocean Remembers Indians and the Tides of Empire, in which we have a lot of things that we can understand not only about Klings, I think, but mostly about Klings, but about Indians in general in historical perspective, but also because I think this is related to the recent phenomena in Singapore and Malaysia about the slur phenomena of Kling names. So we will have first the explanation from the author about 20 minutes about this book, and then from those of you who probably need more introduction to Dr. Nia Deliana. She is from the Faculty of Social Sciences and she is lecturing about history and also international politics, yeah, in the faculty, and she holds PhD from the IIUM in Malaysia. So this is one of the books resulted from the PhD, right? Without further ado, your time, about 20 minutes, please.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this book lounge. I know it's Ramadan and you're fasting and making the effort to come here. I really appreciate this so much. So yeah, like Zaki said, this book partially is from my PhD dissertation, okay? And it takes like 1.5 years for me since, signing with the publication and to finish it all the way through with the editors and reviews. And there was a discussion about the cover and the title of this book. As you see, the titles, Indians and the Tides of Empire. Originally, the title is The Klings and the Tides of Empire. This book published in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So we were in a really long debate about, whether to put the Klings in the cover of the book or not. And then, because of the sensitivity of the words, we pick finally Indians. But this is still, debatable if you learn about the history of the words, okay? So yeah, I would like to go first, to talk about why I decided to write this book. Basically, it was in 2001. I was in Aceh, and Aceh was in war. Yeah, there were significant, numbers of bombings and shooting going around, right? And in that moment, one of the evening, I sat with my father. He passed away, so I sat with him and talking, and of course he liked to talk about the old days where there was peace and harmony. And at the time, he talked about a community in his hometown, in Pidi, Merdu, northern of Aceh, and he called them Urang Kling, meaning like the people of the Kling, who were merchants, and they intermarried with the locals in Aceh. And then he said, this is why they become our own people. So that gave me a memory of, positivity, right? Like, okay, these Kling people are, they do this, they integrate into the society, they give contribution. There is that kind of positive image towards the Klings people. But then I come to Malaysia. I start, my study doing around, 7 years. I was in Malaysia on and off. And then I learned that this word has become a racial slur. Yeah, so when you mention the Klings, there is that kind of intense, fiery feedback to you, because people, mostly Indians, people are gonna get angry. Indians, Muslims, and Hindus, both of them, gonna get offended and criticize you for not using this word. And this is apparently really serious. I did not realize it was that much serious until, until these guys had to apologize because of using that word. Yeah, Mahathir Mohamad, has used that term within his speech, and he was forced to say sorry, to apologize because of using this word. And then there was recently, in the last several years, Anwar Ibrahim himself had to apologize too, right? And then another case from Singapore, political parties too. This is a candidate using that term, and she has to apologize too, So no, and at that time I was like, wow, what a contrast different between what I learned in Aceh and then what I learned in Malaysia. So this is what triggered me to look further into how this kind of thing come about like this, what changed it, what transformed, why the people, from the past, having that kind of positivity, and then it just became a derogatory, offensive acceptance toward this word, right? Yeah. So this is why my main question is, so this is basically my main question on about to write this book. I would like to know, how the process of changes happen, and because I am historian, I studied, I dig into archives, I dig into so many, data from the past, whatever it is, Western and non-Western records, and then I find also a similar description that my father has informed me, and that is there is a kind of positivity, grander images that coming from the past, and especially during the before the European hegemony, 18th and 19th century, right? So I dig more. So this is what I do. I went through, digging into all these archives, the record, and thank God there was a guy, he passed away, named Ian Proudfoot, really hardworking, really prolific scholars who managed to establish this database before he passed away. And this database basically, dwelled hundreds of thousands of Malay classical texts, niche papers. If you count with the information and the data based on the classification. So I found from his data, just searching the word Keling, there is 804 mentions in 109, classical Malay texts that is written between 1392 and 1930. Yeah, so that much. So previously people don't want to look at this. Yeah, previously people, okay, Keling, I don't study about this. Oh, there is a Keling. Okay, change the word Keling into Indians, or that is that kind of things that made during other scholar pursuance of knowledge, where they indirectly, because of afraid of the retaliation, to be criticized using the word Keling. Sometimes in their scholarly works, they will just diminish the word Keling and replace it with Indians. But I think it is important to stay, with that words, because when we go to the records, you won't be able to find other things. You won't be able to find Indians from the 13th century, from the 14th century, for instance, 15th century. If you go to the, if you look at the Malay annals, for instance, you want to find Indians, you won't be able to find. What available in that all records are the word Kelings. So that's just how I got, okay, this is important, not to make it obscured anymore. Okay, so within all these mentions, classify it, based on the usage of the words. And there are massive amount of geographical identification, Benua Keling, right? Masjid Keling, Tanjung Keling, Kedai Keling, all of this kind of identification, spread not only in Malay world, not only in Malaysia or Strait settlements, but also in Indonesia, in Sumatra, in Java, in Sulawesi. Yeah, as you see, I I include the names of the places over there. So even until now, if you go to these places, you can still find, the word Keling as a place, spatial, identification. And nobody knows anymore why this road name's Keling, why this place named Keling, nobody knows anymore. What is the history behind this, yeah? So, yeah. And then, and from the image that was delivered within all this record is that positivity, right? I classify over there, they were called hero, warrior, envoy. I think I should better stand. Merchant, Sultan, Raja, Mangkubumi, Prime Minister, Shah Bandar, chieftain, from the trader, religious figure, royal scribes, the ship captain, the commander, Commodore Fater. Fater is especially quite common to be used in South India, and that is Pondicherry, the Tranquebar areas. Orang Kaya Bakti, native royal descendants, Kapitan, Wayang, entertainer, soldiers, Raden. You see, some of the Keling were also called Raden because they integrate themselves, marry with interlocal, and they were known, by using this kind of local honorable title, right? Okay, so I go beyond, of course, European sources like Tome Pires, Thomas Bowry, or Thomas Forrest, this guy, the classical guys, their account, of course, they mention about Keling and Kualins, but I would like to go beyond that, providing you something that maybe you've never heard before, right? Tome Pires and the rest of the guys is too common to be, quoted by many scholars already, but this, I don't believe many scholars able to know about this, because the original hikayat itself has been pretty damaged, and this extraction was preserved by one of the disciples somewhere, in the beginning of 20th century. So disciples of the, scholars in Leiden, Indonesian from Maluku. So I would like to read you this one, that, Lalu Mihri Jiguna, this is in Malay, right? Okay, and Valentine called it one of the most accurate hikayat preserved in 17th century, right? Coming from 17th century. So he said, Lalu Mihri Jiguna, this is an actor, he's the guy, the main protagonist in that hikayat. So he was called, Lalu Mihri Jiguna tanya kepada jenderal, kapan semuanya itu hendak kemana? Maka kata jenderal, the Dutch general, kapal itu hendak ke Melaka, ada ke Jambi, ada ke Laut Merah, ada pula ke negeri Hollandes, ada ke Bandar Masil Patani. Bandar Masil Patani is Masulipatam in Coromandel Coast. This is one of the famous ports in the Coromandel Coast. Okay? Maka kata Mihri Jiguna, beta minta kepada jenderal sementari lagi lambat musim, beta hendak turut kapal yang ke Bandar Masil Patani. Mau melihat dunia tanah Keling. Barang seadanya hidupku sehingga datang musim barat. Telah demikian itu berapa lamanya datang ke tanah Keling kepada negeri Tunah Patnam. Tunah Patnam is another name, I think now is not existed anymore, but it is in Coromandel Court, in Coromandel Post, because Tunah Patnam, I think we have to find the original names of this, but this Nam, kind of identical to many ports names in Coromandel Court. Okay, maka naik ke darat berjalan ke negeri Puchijiri. Puchijiri is Pondicherry. Pondicherry. It's also the coastal area. I will show you the map later. Menebus dengan harganya 2 real seorang. Ada tengah 3 real. Ada menjual dirinya sendiri, ada menjual anaknya. As this is the trade and the transports, fee, right? Telah menebus itu maka belayar dari Puducherry lalu kepada Tiru Bambu dan Tiru Mulawasir dan Kunmuri lalu kepada Nagapattinam. Nagapattinam is now over there. Daripada Ferengi duduk di sini maka dinamai Santumi. Santumi is San Thomas. San Thomas even now you can still, if you search Google, it is located in the South India. Adapun Santumi itu ada suatu bukit maka didirikan gerejanya akan tempat berhalanya. And all of this, there are so many names, so many names that has mentioned in this quote alone, and I take it, to as a proof, as evidence that to map where is, the Tanah Keling, the Benua Keling came from, So this is, and also this is to answer to the debate at the time among scholars, because there are many scholars such as, for instance, J.J. Ras, and Shriek, kind of debating on the origins of the killing. Some of them say the origin of the killings is coming from Kediri, Java. Some of the scholars saying that it come from the Coromandel Post. So I intervene, the debate by coming up with those, with the quotation from 17th century local hikayat written in Malay. Okay, so this is the trade route, right? This is the cycle, the long cycle that lasted for many centuries, like this. This is how the South Indian, traveling, trading, making a voyage, to the Southeast Asia, right? So we talk about South India, Coromandel ports. It's located right here. This is right here, all this coastal area, and here Sri Lanka, and it goes here Aceh, right? This is Sumatra. This area all. They have the valuable forest products and minerals too. And from here, it goes to the Malaysia. Yeah, Malaysia and Thailand over there. And it go back to the Coromandel ports. So that is the cycle. The cycle going like this. The cycle going like this, okay, for many centuries. So this is also maybe the reason why you kind of see some kind of similarities in your culture. If you go to South India, for instance, Kayapattinam, Kerala, Malabar, you kind of see, oh, this is the same like from my hometown, all these sarungs, right? The type of the foods, the culinary, something like that. So yeah. Okay. This is another sample of the letters coming from 18th century among the collection of Francis Light, And basically this letter belong to Syed Pillai Marikan. So Marikan, I will talk a bit more later on about the Marikan wealthy mercantile networks. They were shipbuilders, they were merchants, they were also involved in some kind of religious activities. Okay. So my point is this. I make two arguments in this book. The first one is that come the question, why there was such a fluidity in the past. Yeah, I come to that question. This is my first argument. The universality of the Indo-Malay global order before the 18th century facilitated links globalization and the proliferation of the grander images across the Indian Ocean and Strait of Malacca. So my argument is that the global order of Indian Ocean at that time, before the 18th century, is what allow all these kind of differences, not only the killings basically, but the Chinese, the Arabs, the French, right? And the British, the Swedish, all these kind of non-imperial state, non-imperial actors or merchants come together to these places. They could mingle and integrate themselves with the locals. There was that kind of universal type of economic relations, and that is because of that kind of universality that owned by the region Indo-Malay global order, or what you call it now in your mental map, so-called the Malay world, or even now you know it as Southeast Asia, right? Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, etc. Yeah. So this is very much related to the islands, states, the fact that this region connected more with the waters, with seas rather than lands, is what supported the global order has to act that way, because all these islands, if they stay disconnected, if they stay inward looking, they won't be able to run the economy, their political stability. There should be a constant and sustainable connectivity that that allow this such a global order to take place for many centuries, 600 years before the 18th century colonialism. Okay, yeah, and then different players, same trade routes, right? This is also connected to what I said previously, and within all these times, the Chiti you kind of find in many records, this kind of family traders, that become wealthy and then contributive more into the the system of the sovereignties, yeah, in Southeast Asia. So the Chiti, Nainar, Chulia, Labai, Rawdar, Sahib, Marakayar, Bivi, and Gauts. Yeah. So this sort of thing, as a historian, how did I find it? So I just remember a scholar named Robert Wilde, if I'm not mistaken, Richard Roberts. Sorry. So he said that the most reliable way, to construct history is by identifying names, not by events, not by other things, but by names. Is it names of place? Is it names of people? Because as if you see here like this, yeah, and you are Indonesian from Malay. I mean, like you are Indonesian. If you look at this kind of word, do you think this is coming from your community? No, right? Your people has Chiti as a name, Nainar as a name, Labai as a name. All of this foreign to our ear, isn't it? This is not this group of family did not originate from our society, right? So that's why when I learned about this, oh my God, who is this guy? I don't know any kind of sahib or author in my society. So I dig somewhere, and then finding out that this guy coming from, the Coromandel coast. Yeah, coming from South India, the Malabar, the Kerala, But it doesn't mean that, when we say something like this, it means that, oh yeah, they come here, something, with the fear of migration. There was no such migrational fear, yeah, in these days when this guy come. There was only connection and economic interdependence, and that sort of thing. So there was no like immigration strife, like fearing that they're gonna take the economy of the people, etc. Then that's what happened currently, yeah, in many countries. So it was fluid. People were not afraid to find Chiti, Nainar, Chulia trading in your coastal areas because they bring in jobs, right? They bring in economy, something. So yeah, I mean, like this is kind of a good comparison to take. Okay, yeah. So these are all names, yeah. These are all names, and all of them combining from Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. So Nainar Chatum is Malacca, yeah. Nainar Kuniapan is basically a merchant, Malacca, that trading from Malacca, Sumatra to Ambon, and then along the way to China. You can read the Sanjay Subramaniam works on this guy, Nainar Kuniapan, yeah. And he was basically a diplomat and advisor to Pasai Sultanate at the time, and which is in Sumatra. And then Purvan, Puriyatambi, this is also wealthy merchants that going around this region. Sidi Muhammad is in Perak in Malaysia. He has become an economical advisor to the Sultan in Perak. Marikan Muhammad is also wandering around between Aceh, Kedah, and South India. Mir Jamal, this is Kedah advisor. This is a South Indian economic advisor in Kedah who was envied by Francis Light. Yeah. So there were this guy, all this name, hailing at domestic level. From merchant, they rise their position into this one. They become Shah Bandar, they become Sultan advisor, they become local Raja, right? They rise in position. So they were so influential in the 19th century, so influential in the 19th century that European traders at that time find them as a rival, economic rival to them, and it's not because of they have like kind of sophisticated economic infrastructure and so on, no, but because of the trust that built between the South Indian traders with the locals, that they could manage a really long voyage, for instance. They built ships and they ensured the commodities, was not fell into wrong hands. So that sort of thing. And also beside that, I think the most crucial part is that the tax on commodities that they impose is only 15%, compared to the Dutch and the British, who impose 40% to 70% on the commodities. So yeah, so that sort of things, yeah. This is just a graveyard located in Aceh, yeah. So the graveyard from 15th century, Naina Hisana bin Naina, these guys, at the royal position. Okay, now we come here, right? Now we come here in 18th century. This is another evidences of how universal was the global order at the time, right? This is the exact sample of how the local sultanates utilized the quality of the foreigner, to involve in their diplomatic business, right, in the diplomatic affairs. And you can see the French, there was a Chinese Sultan sent Abu Bakr Labai to Carnatic, to discuss about a dispute related to vessels and gold commodities against the French, who resided in Carnatic at that time, who was in alliance to the Carnatic kings at the time. So the reason, the Achenni Sultan sent this guy, because this guy is coming from South India, and he knows the language, right? He knows the language. He could speak, the Indian language, the Hindustani probably, or I don't know. It is not written specifically, but there is a kind of assumption that this guy, because of the language ability, that's why the Sultan entrusted him, as a diplomat, to reach, the Carnatic and talk, to be asking the king of Carnatic to mediate between the French and Aceh at the time. Another diplomat is the one that sent to Istanbul. Yeah, the name is the Marikan. Yeah, Muhammad Marikan, the Captain Marikan. The letters called his name as Captain Marikan. Captain Marikan. Basically, there are several other diplomats too, from the Arabs, even from Italians, Moreno, for instance, to the France king. So this is South Indian American clan, Muhammad Gauth. Muhammad Gauth still question mark. There's not enough proof, to appoint, to look at him as, having that kind of direct lineage to South Indian. There's something that needs to be done. That's why I put a question mark here. But Sidi Muhammad is confirmed that he is from that lineage. And this is the development in 19th century during colonialism. Yeah, European consulates in the Straits Settlement. Yeah, there are Siam consulate and America consulate, and Aceh also keep on sending many diplomats that capable in using numerous language, who were polyglots in documenting, communicating the issues of colonialism and trade implication. Right. So this letter, this is Turkish. This letter written in Jawi. Yeah, and then being translated into Turkish Osman Leja. Yeah, you can read. And this is the second argument I would like to make. Yeah. The British and the Dutch hegemonic order is the cause to the decline of killing autonomous machines and networks. So so there is a global, there's a changes of global and order. There was, treaties that benefited only the colonial masters. There were, So let's say, for instance, these two things, causing the civil war. Yeah, it caused more division between the Sultanate and their own people, the Ule Balang, the Raja. So for this one, I think you need to understand the social structure and political structure in that Sultanate. And also the other thing is that, there is that kind of debt increasing, Basically, if we talk about this one, then we talk about the history of security itself, like how basically the British and the Dutch, the British especially, dominantly supplying soldiers and weapons, to the sultanates at that time to fight against their own people, to fight against the people that rebelling against their rule. So here it is the beginning of that kind of, mindset of assigning treaty with the defense. With the European defense, So, and because of this, the Sultanate went bankrupt. There were when they have to use the soldiers provided by the British, they have to pay, and they could not pay in cash. Of course, they could not pay at the same time the whole amount, and it went to credit system. So they used this credit system, and there is war going on, and the economic was disturbed. So so it affected the economy as well at the time, And this is the name of the ships that belonged to the South Indian merchants, yeah, and some of them written in many, many pages of reports from Madras factory records, for instance. Yeah, I can talk so much about this, but I think we need just to pass. So during this time, many wealthy merchants went bankrupt, yeah, because of the situation, the blockade, the colonial, the war, so yeah. And here is the continuation of that. The second point is that, the fact that currently Kling has been taken as derogatory is because of this plantation industry, yeah, because of this development, yeah, that was initiated, that believed by the British as progressive. They have to develop, they have to do development, by planting more, by opening more land, for plantations, for capitalism, right? So the guy who has to work in those plantations were not natives. They were shipped, they were shipped hundred of thousands from South India. So it was a forced migratory flow. They were shipped from South India to work in the plantation with the low wages, and those laborers, not, of course, I mean, like if you ship 100,000 of people, not all of them are educated, right? So some of them just they were the result of the war that going on, the colonial war in South India, and you can think about like what is the state of these people when they arrived in Malaya, for instance, and some in Medan, for instance, yeah, Sumatra. So this is the case, yeah. And there's another thing is this pseudo-scientific knowledge dissemination, and there is newspaper. So at the colonial newspaper in the early 20th century, for instance, or the late of 19th century, tend to to shape the characteristic of a race among its people. It's not because of because it is scientific, they believe it. It's not because of something that they want to enlighten and giving you some kind of new knowledge, but simply, yeah, because of they want to control. They want to control who gonna get the portion of industrial benefit and who should be isolated. And as I told previously, that there was a kind of economic rivalry towards the South Indian, the wealthy South Indian merchants, and also the Hadramis and the Chinese, right? So this kind of system, portraying them as lesser type of people, combining with the ideas of, the kind of Darwinism, the science of biology and race, So yeah, so this is how people start to think, to look at each other in that kind of racial hierarchy type of manner, that you think, okay, South Indian is lesser than the Chinese, or Chinese is better than the Malays, or that kind of stigma basically has been built many, many decades before through this kind of newspapers, yeah? Okay, so this is the laborers, the plantation, the guy that were paid in low wages, the forced migration, the coolies, yeah? And they are not in Malaya, but in Medan, yeah? And this is the records from Dutch archive, Leiden University, and basically, the Dutch also treat the South Indian the same, like how the British, treat them. The Dutch, colonial officers tend to call them bastard, cunnings, untrustable, something like that. Even though those South Indian they affiliated to has that kind of qualification, they were polyglot, they know the voyage system, they know the law, something like that. So they were educated, but still, that kind of things continue during the colonial imperial period. So yeah, I think by this, yeah, this is just a sample of the newspaper that distributed at the time. And this is the things that I just want to compare, the fact that, now there is a kind of sensitivity towards foreigners, right? Or the killing, in some areas. I would like to just put a comparison, side to side on how basically, on what basically has changed. And that particular thing is very clear is the global order. Yeah, so this is the Indian Ocean Global Order. I would call it. I don't know. Maybe this just need further research. Maybe this is not. Maybe there's that kind of geopolitical type that disseminated from the global order Indian Ocean that is effect the Strait of Malacca and so on. Yeah. So yeah, I think I can stop there. Let me hear some comments from my discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nia Deliana, for your wonderful explanation. And this is really, I think, not only thought-provoking, but this is also important. Not only because you draw a lot of, archive here, not only from Islamic, but European, and many more, from archive, manuscript, even the print newspaper during the colonial period. Which from this comparison, we could see that before the colonial encroachment, I think this is related to Amitav Acharya, right? About the multiplex, if I'm not wrong, inclusive global order in the Indian Ocean. Well, we have the opportunity for the second speaker to comment critically or for historically and also many things politically as well. From Professor Faris Nur, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today, especially to discuss what I think is a very important book produced by one of our colleagues here at UIII. I think that I can. There are two things I want to basically highlight here. The first is that I think Dr. Nia's book comes in the tradition of important works like K.S. Chowdhury's Asia Before Europe. Asia Before Europe, the world of the Indian Ocean from the rise of Islam to 1750, which I think is a landmark text. And in so many ways, it also can be read in conjunction with Curtis's work, The Indianized States of Southeast Asia, Munoz' work that looks at the pre-Islamic connections between South Asia and Southeast Asia. And I think what's doubly important here is that Nia's work builds upon the research that has been done and expands the frontiers further by looking at the dynamics of politics from the colonial to the post-colonial present. I think what this book shows, and we're having this discussion in the context of today, where we talk about globalization, South-South, initiatives, contact between the South. I think what you see here, and I think this is a hugely important point for us, is that the history of the Klings, is basically a history of a southern globalization. It is a globalization that was initiated by people of the South even before the term South emerged, because we know the term South is a loaded term, because you can't have a South without the North, and South and North, these are terms that actually talk about power differentials and economic differentials. And this harks back to a period when Asia was able to develop its own globalization on its own terms. And I think what I find fascinating about this book is the way in which you look at the vocabularies, the names, not only place names, but also the names attached to social functions and roles in society, which points to an entire socio-economic, socio-cultural life world that actually existed and then was superseded and erased by colonialism. So in that respect, this is a book not only about the people of the South, not only about the connections between South Asia and Southeast Asia, but it's basically a study of globalization. And if you want to do a study of globalization, this is one way of doing it. One doesn't just study the movement of capital, one studies the movements of people through settlement and exchange and cross-fertilization. And here you see how this contact is actually multi-layered. Now, since you talk about language, let's look at the words, right? You mentioned the Coromandel Coast. Coromandel from a derivative of the word Cholamandalam. Cholamandalam, the land of the Cholas. So what we have here in the history of the people of the Coromandel and of the Kalinga coast are people from South Asia who maintained communication, contact, movement, and settlement and migration over a period of time from the Hindu-Buddhist period to the arrival of Islam. I mean, the end of the Cholas, 13th century, coincides with the rise of Islam in Southeast Asia. And what we see here, and this is another important point, is the coming of a different belief system did not lead to conflict, right? So what do we get out of this? Us as not only historians, but people who study politics and geopolitics. Here you have nations that have to deal with alterity and difference without falling into the oppositional dialectics of immediate opposition. Like you said, yeah, the early settlement doesn't come with the they're going to steal our jobs narrative. How different is that from what we are seeing in the world today? And I think for us in the South, and again, we are a Southern university, we're in a Southern country, UIII is committed to uplifting the voice of the South. I think it's very important that a book like this emerges from the South. For us to reclaim the histories and geographies and vocabularies of the South. So in that sense, congratulations. By the way, she didn't pay me to say nice things. Yeah? I mean, this is all sincere, right? Although you owe me dinner after Ramadan. Okay, now, no, so I think, so how do we read a book like this? And I think here is where historians like us, have always been making this point. History is never just a collection of names and dates. History provides you good history, proper history, and this is good history, yeah? Proper history because it's based on not only data, but it analyzes processes, and that's what history is. It's actually a record of processes, allows us to understand processes and mechanisms. And I think a book like this is important not only for those of us who study South Asia or Southeast Asia, but also for those of us who study, processes, globalization as a process. You want a history of globalization? This is a history of globalization. This is a history of globalization in the South, by the South, for the South. Yeah. Before they emerged this idea that, this notion of a South against North or East against West dichotomy. So it's a nice segue from Chowdhury, Munoz, Kodes, all the way to Delina. So your name is going to be part of the tradition now. So get used to it, right? The other thing that I find interesting, and this is where I put on my other hat, which is that of a philosopher of language, yeah? Because what's driving this book is a question: how did this identity become problematized and stigmatized? Yeah, and I think here is where I think we need to also command the tools of linguistics and basic linguistics and how language works. And what Nia shows in this book is how a term, a general term, kling, which begins not only as neutral, but actually benign and positive, right, becomes in time a negative term. Now, this is true of all things. This is true of all things. All words, can experience change over time. So, like, if you look at the history of the West's engagement with Asia, Asia begins as a positive thing. It's a land of plenty, it's a land of wonder, it's a land of wealth and riches. But over time, with the advances of colonial capitalism, Asia as a concept becomes denigrated. Then Asia is backward, savage, primitive. The same with Africa. Africa begins as an idea that is positive. It's alluring, it's something that draws Europeans to come into contact and engagement with it. But after the subjugation of Africa, then the term Africa, the same word, is given a negative connotation. Then Africa is chaos, anarchy, backwardness, and what have you. Now, this is true of all words, but words don't just become negative, they can become positive as well. Wealth, which in the past was a negative thing, is now very positive, right? So everyone wants to be a millionaire. So this is why, as historians, we don't just study processes. The processes are meant to actually illustrate how our lived reality changes over time. And of course, the situation that you have now, I agree, in some parts of Southeast Asia, the term kling may have negative connotations, not for all, but for some. But that can also change. So I think it's important that we as historians play a role in this, that we remind people that your reality today is not natural. Yeah, if you live in this world now, in the age of late post-industrial capitalism and hyper-consumerism and and the all the anxieties that we face about our future, that's not a natural process. Processes lead us to where we are now. If you understand the process, then you understand how we got here. If you understand how we got here, that also gives you ways to perhaps address the question and attempt solutions. So I see this work as, like I said, an important work of history. It's also an important study of globalization. And if you look at it through the lens of, say, discourse analysis, then it's also an important contribution to our understanding of how words change meaning over time. And if words change meaning over time, then the language you use to describe our reality also changes over time, because our reality is discursively constructed, right? So in that sense, if you put it up on the sort of academic achievement KPI, right, it sort of ticks all the boxes, you know. So the dean is here, so perhaps I can suggest a bonus for a work. And I think it's important that this book comes from us, from UIII. Yeah, I want to end with that. I think UIII has an important role. We regard ourselves not only as an Islamic university, but as a kind of diplomatic effort. UIII is trying to be different. It's trying to be a university that internationalizes not only Indonesian scholarship, but scholarship from the South. It's hugely important. I keep telling this to all the students, right? I mean, we write for ourselves. We have to write our own histories, our own theories, our own explanations to understand how and why we are now. That doesn't mean blindly rejecting everything else, but it means trying to grapple with hard issues like this in a very honest and academic way. And I think this is the kind of scholarship that UIII has to keep producing over time. That's the only way that will make an impact in the world. So thank you for inviting me to speak about your book. Thank you for the free copy as well. But above all, thank you for, I think, making an important contribution to our field, history. Right.
Thank you, Professor Faris Nur. So we hope here at UIII in the future we'll have a lot of students in history, you know, because I know we don't have any department, something like history department, political science department, etc. But this is one of the important steps in the future, as addressed by Professor Faris Nur, and he stated before at least two points. One on the importance of the global South, right, and the second one, even the name of the South just has been named recently, and the second one also, this is the book about globalization, right? Which is really important for us here as this academic and scholarly community, but also probably broader Southeast Asian, Indonesian context. Well, we have 6 free copies for 6 questions. We will open the first batch of question. Wow. Wow, I don't know. Bu Nia, you should choose. Yeah, female first? Nope. Okay, probably one you, and then second, and then third. Okay, please state, I mean, your name and institution if you.
Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. My name is Akbar Gusti Rarjo, or usually called Akbar. I study at Pakuan University, majoring in computer science. I have a question for Miss Nisa. Miss Nia. Sorry, Miss. What is the main message the authors want to convey to readers, especially the younger generation or Gen Z children, through the book The Ocean Remembers? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Gilang Pandrika, but you can call me Gilang. I am from a Generasi Literat organization, but I have many questions in this book. The first question is, what inspired you to write this book? Can you and have the key of the message to one you write in this book? And the second question is, what advice what you give to aspiring writers? Because this book I take many inspired and then many good knowledge about this historical and many more. And thank you for attention and this question. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Faris. I am a student here at Faculty of Islamic Studies. First, I want to comment. Maybe I want to connect this book with my previous readings. When I listen to your eloquent presentation, it reminds me first with the book Islamic Law in Circulation by Mahmud Kuria. He talked about the history of Indian Ocean. So what connects Malacca with South India, with Yemen, until Tanzania is Shafi'ism, Shafi'iyah. So this book also talk about what connect them. And also the author that maybe have similar approach to you is Jonathan Brown with his two books, Islam and Blackness and Islam and Slavery. He questioned why, he actually told a story that he discussed it with slavery, and he read Hadith and Quran. How can slavery just mention without any criticism? So he began to search the Islamic intellectual history about slavery and also about blackness. Maybe blackness more relevant to killings. Both of blackness and killings become pejorative terms, and this kind of related three books with the Ocean Remembers. So my question is about the manuscript. You mentioned that there is a database about manuscript. Do you think that this manuscript is enough, or we need more manuscript editors? I also work with manuscript especially in determining Ramadan. And I asked the senior that say most of manuscripts still with the family, within the family library. Do you think manuscript about killings is enough, or we need more manuscript editors, or like you did, you come to the database and do more research about it? And maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I think that question is directed to me, all of them, or okay. The first two question I think is related to each other. Correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, you were asking like what kind of message I should deliver to the young generation, the Gen Z, by this book, right? So yeah. So I think there is only two words. Yeah, my message is stay curious and don't get provoked. I think these two words, especially when the young generation now, the Gen Z, they live with the digital media, and this is the historical side of of that kind of racial issues, right? But what the Gen Z experience is directly on the social media, the digital platform. They read and they get divided. They read and they hate, right? They read, they fear, and they hate because of numerous posts delivered in the social media, playing with the issue of race, for instance. And I think you can relate too. Like there are many cases of how the Bangladeshi people, for instance, has been tarnished a lot on social media, calling them dirty, calling them that kind of calling them some kind of small animals swarming to the other countries, something like that. Very very negative connotation, which is racial issues and this sort of thing. And sometimes the post backed it up with some kind of pseudo evidences. They call it, there's a kind of proof and evidences. But when you look, you should. I think people need to care more about the evidence that provided, whether it is, it's not about it is hoax or fake. It needs you to go through extra lengths to make sure that that you don't end it up in a hate or fear of something that you don't know. So yeah, so that's the only things I think we can relate from this book. Because basically, if you look at the relation between the people, there are more things that connect us than what differ between us. So I would like people, the young generation to live in that kind of arena of positivity when they have that kind of imagination of race toward other people. So yeah, I think the second one. Okay. So yeah, I'm happy that this book became the inspiration of our friends. Yeah. Brother, sorry, your name is. I'm sorry. Gilang. Yeah, Gilang. Okay, Gilang. So thank you so much for your question. But I think it's related to the first one, right? That is similar, like what is the advice I could give. And I think if you want me to say something more about things, then you can just, let me know. Yeah, okay? The third one is about the Mahmud Kuria's book, and the manuscript. Okay, you relate it to the books that you read, which is very good. And about the Keling's database, whether scholars like me in the future would need something more, is I would say definitely, because what I use is that Ian Proudfoot Concordance Project database, and his main sources, all this kind of text coming from Malay world, the Malay text, not the Javanese text. The Javanese written text and other different languages, which I believe exist. I have used several of the Javanese written texts in this book, but I believe there are some more that has not been properly documented because there has been inadequate attention to this word previously. So if we do some extra job, some extra works, to just concentrate on whatever text coming from Javanese culture, Sundanese culture, let's say for example, Cirebon, the Lampung, for instance, then I think there will be some important additional things that we can add to this book. So yeah, if I don't know if you are a literarian, and if you read some kind of serat, serat and babat, or sejarah Cirebon, for instance, right? So there are so many words Keling attached to their kings, attached to the penghulu, attached to the raden, attached to their, to the king. So I don't know, like what is next? Can we can do, to contribute further to this discussion? I think it's going to be more. It is so important if we could, gather some more manuscripts like that in the future. Okay. So yeah, the books gonna go or.
My advice for younger generation is to always accord female academics the same respect that male academics get. So Dr. Nia's name is Dr. Nia, not Miss Nia, and I think that's important. Yeah. Now, as far as the pressures on Gen Z are concerned, I think we live in an age where history is being systematically erased, and this is extremely dangerous. This is extremely dangerous. The casual daily erasure of history is happening all the time, and it's the erasure of history that then allows people to hijack words. Yeah, and so Africa can be weaponized, Keling can be weaponized, Chinese can be weaponized, Malay can be weaponized. So it's because we don't know the roots of words, and so if you don't know your history. I mean, history is not for decoration. Yeah, the reason why we do historical analysis is because, like I said, history basically records processes. Progression, it looks at how hierarchies and distinctions and categories are built. You understand history as a means of understanding how the world is structured around you. The world's not natural. Yeah, there's agency behind it. Now, if you do that, then I think perhaps, I'm not saying that it's a solution, but it perhaps, makes it more difficult for people to redefine terms or deploy words, in a nasty, strategic manner, which we see all the time happening in social media today. And social media is not, there's no podcast that can match actually reading the archives. For those of us who work in archives, there's no TikTok video, no 5-minute, 10-minute podcast can match actually doing the research. And the reason why, to go back to the question of manuscripts, the reason why manuscripts are so important is that there's still millions of manuscripts in the world that have not been digested and collected. In many parts of Africa, I have colleagues in Germany who work on North Africa. There are literally millions of manuscripts that have still to be documented. And we need to do this. And this is an urgent task. Yeah? This is an urgent task. And I think these documents, because they collect not only our history, but they record these processes, these documents, I think it's the obligation of all countries, especially in the South, to actually collect and digitalize these documents to bring them back into the public domain. Now, unfortunately, as you note in your book, what's happened from the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century is that one of the factors that ends up marginalizing the South Indians, is the emergence of modern colonial capitalism. And so this logic of development is the thing that animates our politics today. So it's very hard to go to a politician and say that, look, we need money to digitalize archives. We need money to digitalize manuscripts, because the immediate question is, where's the kelapa sawit? Where's the palm oil? What's the profit in all this, right? But the profit is, and I always say this, I cannot show you the benefit, the economic benefit of studying history, but I can show you the cost of not knowing your history. The cost of not knowing your history is the kind of mass populism that we see today. This is a result of people simply shooting their mouths off without knowing the background. If all the debates you talk about the way in which the term has become a slur, this is done only because people don't know the history of the word, right? And this is what happens when you don't know the history of words, concepts, ideas. Whether it's the word killing or the word Arab or the concept of development, if you don't know the history of it, then we just take it blindly. And I think that's why I think this book is very important. Yeah.
The one female, the second one, and then I think because last one, all female, is gender balance.
Selamat pagi, good morning. Boleh pakai bahasa Indonesia? Nanti biar Jacques yang terjemahin. Saya Diah, saya dari Depok. Ya. Ini saya tertarik, saya pertama baca ini bukunya Dr. Nia ini di Gerak Budaya waktu itu di live tayang ketika launching di situ. Jadi sekarang saya datang ke sini. Pertama judulnya juga sangat menarik. Terus ini sehubungan sama pertanyaan saya. Ketika perubahan ya dari Indian Ocean Global Order ke Colonial Order itu juga terjadi di sini. Dr. Nia juga udah sebutin ya, sebetulnya dari Cosmopolitan Universal Trade Network ke Monopolized Colonial Trade. Tapi saya pingin mungkin yang sifatnya ke kesadaran geografis gitu. Jadi dari yang asalnya kita sangat judulnya aja udah Ocean Remember tapi kita forget Ocean gitu kan ya. Ocean remember us tapi kita yang lupa sama Ocean gitu. Kita lupa bahwa kita archipel gitu. Nah, jadi kesadaran geografis yang berubah saat itu gitu ya. Dari kita yang sangat terbuka, archipel, kalau Pram bilangnya arus dari selatan ke utara gitu ya, kemudian dia berbalik gitu, menjadi kita yang insular dan unsolid. Kesadaran geografisnya insular, kesadaran kemanusiaan kita unsolid. Kita jadi purity tapi through dehumanization. Itulah natif gitu. Gitu. Yang di mungkin Profesor Faris akan bisa lebih banyak ngomong soal itu gitu. Itu jadi saya ingin tahu sehingga kayak bulan Desember kemarin kita lihat kehancuran Sumatera itu sebetulnya ketika ini udah tidak kuat lagi menampung gitu. Global order yang kolonial yang di global order kolonial yang start berapa ratus tahun yang lalu itu masih kita continue sampai sekarang, dan itu sekarang udah exhaustive gitu. Ada satu buku yang sangat menarik dari pasangan suami istri Patnaiks ya, itu ada konsep yang saya pikir sangat menarik kalau diintegrasikan ke penulisan sejarah kita di Nusantara gitu. Kalau saya ngomong Nusantara itu bukan cuma Indonesia tapi Malaysia, Filipina, negeri di bawah angin gitu ya, itu Nusantara gitu. Jadi mereka berdua ada elaborasi satu konsep yang sangat menarik, exogenous stimuli. Jadi salah satunya adalah alam gitu. Jadi bagaimana alam kemudian udah exhaustive karena kita ignore, karena kita betul-betul kesadaran geografis kita udah berubah, kita udah ignore mereka gitu. Itu sih, itu satu. Terus kedua, apakah di situ ada sumber dewa yang menyebutkan soal batara iklim? Batara iklim, iya, yang saya kebetulan tesis saya penelitian soal sejarah Nusantara menurut salah satu kelompok kejawen gitu. Jadi mereka mempercayai bahwa dulu salah satu raja Jawa yang tertua itu batara iklim dan kulitnya hitam gitu. Ya, makasih.
Hello, thank you for your presentation today. My name is Grace. I'm a student here at UIII and I'm studying a master's in political science, focusing on international relations. So I'm interested in your book because I've always been interested in migrant labor and slavery, both in the historical context and the contemporary issues. My background is in history and also law. I'm interested in your process for this book. So I've done a very small amount of historical analysis myself, and the sources that we looked at were mostly Dutch, Portuguese, Chinese, and English. So I think you've looked at sources that were a bit more difficult to find. And I was thinking, since you've had access to these sources that, you know, they're not very easy to come by, you do have to look deeper. And since a large portion of your research has resulted in knowledge about slavery and about migrants, movements of migrants, I'm wondering if your next work might consider looking at the history of slavery in the region from this perspective. And as to your process, I'm interested in how you stayed focused throughout it, because you did begin with looking at the origins of a word. Why is this word repeating? And over time it would be easy, I think, to become distracted and go, oh, well, you know, it relates to this aspect of history or this emergence of a cultural link, you know, between two countries. It's quite fascinating. You could easily be sidetracked. So just as a tip, perhaps for my own research, how did you stay focused? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Nia, Pak Faris, and Pak Zeki for this great discussion. I can see that the book has great terminologies, but since I'm not really familiar with them as of now, but yet I'm very interested in the niche and the topic, I would need this book to just deepen my concepts for the Indian Ocean context, and of course to get the gist of the book. So the first thing that intrigued me is the title of the book. So my question to Dr. Nia is that what made you choose to write The Ocean Remembers? I hope there must be a meaningful meaning to it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for the 3 questions. The vibe is kind of different from the first wave of questions. Yeah, thank you. Which is both, good. So yeah, I will answer first from from Ibu. Namanya siapa, Ma? Dia, Ibu Dia. Okay. So I think about this geographical consciousness. Maybe Farish gonna be able to elaborate more on that. Yeah. What I know is a little bit. That the fact that there was the mental map that we have currently is so much different than what has been built before. Before, we don't see borders as what separate us. There was no such things. That kind of land barrier is basically gonna define the people who live in that within that areas. So there was a kind of fluidity. Yeah, it was not inward-looking type of the people. It was outward-looking. There's the kind of fluidity, and especially when it's related to the people between the islands. Yeah, they could name. They will not call it like, for instance, like now, Sumatra. Sumatra meaning that everybody's that living in that island. Yeah, they will not call. I come from Sumatra. No, but they would identify themselves with either with their family names or with the place where they were born. Let's say, for instance, there are many cases of names where we can find that they use their geographical. Let's say, for instance, Abdul Rauf Al-Singkili, for instance. Al-Singkili is a name of a place somewhere in south part of Aceh, Al-Singkili. Or, for instance, if the people from Sumatra, from Aceh, going to Mecca and Medina, and then they start to put the geographical names behind their names, and that becomes like, for instance, Al-Ashi, something like that, to inform the people, the outsiders, the people at international arenas, that they come from that region, something like this. So yeah, so the ideas of the geography is so much different. Yeah, you don't call it, I am Indonesian, for instance. You don't. People did not know, because the invention of that name itself just come in the 20th century, and that is by the contribution of the colonial powers too. Like to name your, previously the Dutch called these areas the Dutch East Indies, right? The eastern side of India, something like that. And then somehow, in the 20th century, before the 1945, people start to call it, there's a kind of discussion and internal discussion within the governmental level that was going to succeed the colonial powers, that we can name these regions as Indonesia. And also Malaysia, for instance. Malaysia, the same case. All these kind of names just came with in the 20th centuries. In the past, people don't call us, I am Malay. They don't even identify them that way about themselves. I am Chinese, I am Indians. They did not. But they know by their names. Your names. If you're a criminal, then you will be known by your names, not by your race. If you do something, if you involve, if you're a refugee, if you seek, if you are a victim of a war, for instance, they will not call you, they will not attach that kind of race to you, but your names, these kind of things. So this kind of idea, the foreigners, for instance, it just come, foreigners, inlanders, the citizen, for instance, it's a product of 20th century, and especially I remember United Nations has just established the map, calling this area Southeast Asia in 1975. This is United Nations, and it's legitimate. They legitimate the name of Southeast Asia to confine, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, etc., all this, and they call it Southeast Asia just in 1975. Before that, there's no such, category of regions, and also it goes with the continental, etc. So I think for further explanation, I'll give to him, and then and then the second one, Batara Keling, it could be. I have used several sources, like say for instance Serat Kanda, but you will see the books and refer to it. But as far as I remember, I have not encountered Batara Keling, Batara Ikling, yeah. But I believe it's your next job probably to to continue finding it. Of course, you come up with this question because you have found this somewhere, right? Like there is that kind of words about Batara Ikling somewhere written, and your next thing is just to trace, to trace where is the primary sources that author, So yeah, I have, even me, so many things I write here, just compile everything. So you see Rama Keling, yes, yeah. So I mean, you better have a look at the books, but I don't remember I have included more information about Batara Ikling. Yeah. Okay. The second question from Grace. Oh, you want to continue there first? Okay. About migrant, migratory labor market. And slavery. So you are asking about the archival sources, right? So nowadays, I don't know, I do this book like in 10 years, in 10 years meaning that there is that kind of changes in the digital world, right? So before, let's say when I did, in the earlier years, I just go to library and dig into the archives, the National Library, and then ask manually. And they have the catalog, I go through for the catalog, relying on the decades, on the centuries, Usually every archival center is going to have that catalog. That is your first way on trying to find the migratory patterns. And probably if the cataloging system is good, they're going to put it, they're going to classify it as migration, Otherwise, you're going to have to dwell on the difference of names or the names that you have found somewhere in other scholarship previously, the names of the migrant, for instance, the community, that were probably, migrated in a groups, somewhere outside their hometown region. So you try to use as much as possible names identification if they are not familiar to you, for instance. That is very first clue, like what I do in here. Yeah. The other thing is that there are many digital archives as well, which is easy nowadays to search. Let's say I could give you basically several samples. Yeah. If you do migrant labor market in Australia, for instance, European records, for instance. So I believe that if you go to the UNRI, it is manual. They don't have digital. You have to visit yourself and dig. Yeah? But the other thing is they have also digitized version. Archive.org, for instance, loc.us, .co.us. So if you need direct names of the website that dwelt thousands of database, that where you can immediately go to the direct pages from certain type of periods, then now it's easy to do historical. What's not easy probably is to find something that has been missing and not being able to catalog so far. Like for instance, the records from the personal collections. Yeah, when I went to South India, when I went to Pulicat last year, I met one old lady. Yeah, I met one old lady whose husband has been a merchant in Southeast Asia. And her record, that kind of person, that kind of sources, her records will not be able being you cannot find her records anywhere in digitized version online or in any library. This is like a significant rare instances that I met, that it just happened. I met her and then she said, hey, you know, my husband was a merchant. He sold this one and this one. He traveled from Thailand, you know, from Thailand to Malaysia to Singapore, you know. So there is that kind of cycle, similar cycle that they use, and he traveled for many years, you know. And it just happened that she has some kind of, you know, postcard, some kind of old passport, you know, that is not in the current situation, that kind of document that coming from, you know, 1900, 1920s and 1930s. This is your primary sources. If you want to go, you know, the historical way, this is the way you find that this guy is the primary sources that you can use. This is credible, you know, because it comes immediately. It is the only, you know, there's no further debate about the credibility of this kind of sources, but it comes directly from the family members, with the names, right, with the root of the tradesperson, with the year of he was born, and with the location where he came from. So that sort of thing. This is very peculiar. And for slavery too, I believe, you know, is very much done already. There are so many compiled sources about slavery already in Leiden University, for instance, and British library. So it should be, I don't know, nowadays it should be easier to do historical research. The other things your question is about the tips to write this book, and also it is related to Eman's question too. The tips, oh my God, this is partially from my dissertation, okay? And then I was told, hey, Nia, you know, we are interested in your book, but can you turn this dissertation into a book format? That means, and especially when the publication is not academic, university press, for instance, then I have to mind the language should be able, you know, to be accessible to the general readers, which I like. This is what I want to do as a scholar. I want my works to be, you know, the common people like you will be able to read my works, not using many tough language, for instance. So yeah, I do it. So I start to, you know, to restructure everything. I start to restructure, not rewriting the whole thing, just restructuring, adding and taking out, you know, things, and of course, you know, putting some more inside. This is a lot of works of revision. Yeah? So the tip is that, the tip, for instance, and for now, as a youth student, maybe what is most important is that you should be aware of the data that you have. You should be the leaders of your own data. You know, without enough data, without a strong data, you won't be able to produce any kind of book, or you won't be able to produce any kind of, you know, strong argument that you will back up by all those data. So sometimes there are some kind of moments where the data is inadequate, and in that instances, if it is historical, that inadequate data, if it is rare, it is still very important. So I think that's all. I give to Pak Fabish.
Don't call me Pak. Yes. I feel old immediately. The point about history, I think, history, the way it's been done, is being done today, and the way it's been done for the last few decades, I think has gone a long way, yeah? Not the way that we were taught history at school, which is very boring. Just names, dates. I think today we are thankful for the fact that of all the disciplines in the humanities, history is perhaps the one that's been most influenced by other disciplines and other methodologies. So you have material history, you have even music history, art history, history of words, yeah? So, like Nia said, you can find historical resources everywhere. The very words you use are all historical. Every word you use has a history to it, right? So, if you learn to look at this history of migration, I'll give you an example. You take the word farang, yeah? In Persian means a Westerner. From Persian, farang, farangi, goes all the way to South Asia, Feringgi, comes all the way to Southeast Asia. In Penang, there's Batu Feringgi. Go to Thailand, it's Farang. So what does it mean? It basically means a white Western European. But the roots of it go back to the history of the Crusades, because the etymological root of the word is Franks. It's the Franks of Europe who were fighting the Arabs. So from Europe all the way to Southeast Asia, this word travels and it changes meaning over time. It has different connotations depending on context, a bit like the word killing again, yeah, it travels. So the very words themselves carry history. And so you don't have to go very far. Look at your vocabularies and look at how, I think this is also important for us because I want to go back to scholarship from the South, yeah. There is a tendency, I think, for many academics in the South to look at how the non-Southern world impacted on the South. But we don't spend enough time looking at how the South or the East impacted on the North and the West. Yep. So it's also interesting when you start reading. I mean, one of my backgrounds is English literature, and when you actually read English literature, you start finding elements of Southeast Asia and South Asia and Africa popping up in English literature, whether it's high literature or popular literature. You read the stories of Sherlock Holmes, right? And then there's a famous story. One of the Sherlock Holmes stories, Sherlock Holmes and the Rat from Sumatra, right? And so you have to start having these elements woven into, you read your Jane Austen. Jane Austen's novels, connect the history of England with the history of the Caribbean, if you read it through the lens of history. And so you look at our part of the world, we always talk about how the West sees Southeast Asia. But Southeast Asia also entered the vocabulary and the common imaginary of Europeans. If you know the English playwright, yep, Henry Fielding, novelist and playwright, he has a play written in 1730, and he uses the phrase, the King of Bunton. The King of Bunton. The King of Bunton in England in the early 18th century was a term used to describe someone who was super rich, yeah, sort of Elon Musk of England at the time. So if you were like super rich in England, they say, wow, he's the King of Bunton. Why? Because the reputation of Bunton, which is here, yeah, in the next, just to the west of Jakarta, Bunton was then, from the late 16th, 17th, and early 18th century, one of the richest ports of Asia, right? So the legend of Bunton traveled all the way to Europe. So if you were super rich at the time, people say, wow, he's the King of Bunton. Look at the King of Bunton. It means you're that rich because of the reputation of Bunton. So this is where it becomes interesting. So what Nia does in this book is you connect the dots. Yeah, you connect these movements and how when people travel, people bring ideas, vocabularies, beliefs, ideologies, geographies with them. And so these things mix and match. Can I go back to the question earlier about geography? Yeah, and I think I agree. Saya rasa kan kalau kita lihat salah satu dampaknya kolonialisme di rantau kita adalah kita telah dikotakkan. Ya. Dan apalagi dalam kasus sejarah Jawa, dalam tulisannya Stanford Raffles, bukunya The History of Java. Saya nggak tahu kenapa di Indonesia fan club untuk Raffles ini begitu besar ya. Ramai orang yang sangat senang sayang pada Raffles. Saya benci pada ini. Ya, itu kolonialis banget ya. Tapi yang menarik tentang buku The History of Java itu adalah ya dalam buku itu ada peta Jawa. Yang menarik kalau kita bandingkan peta Jawa Raffles itu dengan peta-peta Asia Tenggara pada waktu itu, kan peta-peta lain menggambarkan Nusantara, ya, wilayah kelautan Asia Tenggara. Tapi dalam bukunya History of Java itu peta Jawa itu hanya Jawa. Jadi Pulau Jawa dipulaukan lagi, ya. Dan tulisan Raffles itu memberikan gambaran bahwa masyarakat Jawa dan budaya Jawa dan tamadun Jawa itu wujud hanya dari Jawa. Seakan tidak ada kontak langsung antara Jawa dan seluruh rantau Asia Tenggara dan Asia. Nah, ini bahaya, ya. Jadi kita dikotakkan. This is the power of maps. Maps are very powerful tools. The map of Java that Raffles produced in 1817 presents a Java that is entirely disconnected from Southeast Asia, which is historically not true. And Raffles is not stupid. He knows that. Yeah. So he does it deliberately. It is a deliberate attempt to box Java. And that's what's happened to us. We are boxed into these categories. You're Sumatran, you're Javanese, you're Filipino, and I think, on the one hand today we talk about globalization. We are all supposed to be, all of us, especially the younger generation, global citizens and all that. But we remain mentally, trapped in our tiny, narrow epistemic categories. And I think this is actually very dangerous. So one of the things we need to do, like we said, we need a faculty of history. We should have a faculty of geography as well. Because the geography of the post-colonial South is a colonial geography. The entire map of Southeast Asia is a colonial map. The entire map of Africa is a colonial map. Read Basil Davidson's book, yeah, The Black Man's Burden, Africa and the Curse of the Nation State. Africa, as we know it today, was constructed through colonization. All the lines you see on the map, these are not lines drawn by Africans. Who drew the map of Southeast Asia? Not us. Yeah? The lines, the borders of Southeast Asia were drawn in London and Paris and Den Haag and Madrid, not us. So, now it doesn't mean like tomorrow suddenly we throw away our passports and we just walk, wherever we can. We can't do that. We know that. But we can reconceptualize this. And I think this is what Nia's book is doing. Yeah, what this book is doing is making you think, look, there was another time in the past, not too long ago, when in Asia, in the widest sense of the word, there was another kind of globalization that did not come with the language of nationalism or hostility towards foreigners. And this is the interesting thing, you didn't mention this, but the Kalings are not foreign. They are not foreign, yeah? Like, we are not foreigners to one another. Historically, in the past, the foreigner is a relatively late concept that comes into our languages because historically we are all mixed, right? So, and for me, this is more dangerous than calling Indians inferior. Calling them foreigners makes it even more problematic, because remember, while this is happening, the same was happening to Arabs, Persians, Chinese, Armenians, Eurasians, who are all then being labeled as foreigners. So the categories you talk about, Inlander, Auslander, and all these things are part of the vocabulary that we have today. So hopefully, more books like this will actually, we cannot undo the past, we know that, but at least make us question the past. And if you question the past, you question your present reality as well. And I think that's why it's important. So yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much for. Do we have? Sure. 1 minute? Okay.
So I think what Pak Farish mentioned is very important because we are historically mixing, and we can reflect from our experience in this room. There is no one that is extremely white and extremely black. Different with things in the America, for instance. So we are in the spectrum of skin color that to some extent need more integration rather than racism in the America, for instance. Because in my experience, I remember that during my childhood, I was bullied a lot simply because I was too white to becoming a rural child. Like I was stay inside, bookish, not playing in the river, not that stereotype of Laskar Pelangi, for instance. I was very indoor. And to some extent, my friends was very outdoorsy. They are very, to some extent, clean because they are very outdoorsy. And they bullied me a lot because I was too white to become an a rural boy. And to some extent, Bu Nidel mentioned things like plantation, that people working outside, that to some extent become the root of slavery. And I think we can connect to the context of modern slavery right now, because right now, as a well-educated elite, to some extent, I'm constantly working inside this beautiful library and beautiful office, compared to abang-abang Gojek, for instance. They are constantly exposed to that sun of Depok. Can you imagine that they must do fasting with this heat outside the room? And we can say that they extremely clean from day to day. And maybe if my fate is quite different, if to some extent I lost this job and I decide to become Abang Gojek, to some extent I will be clean as well because of this sun exposure of Depok. So I think the question about slavery can be connected as well to modern slavery right now, because we here have privilege to stay indoor, but a lot of people there don't have such people. They must work outdoors. So to some extent, maybe some of us need to write another book about modern slavery and why skin color can be really different because of our different occupation. Yeah,
But I
thank
think
you.
you're in danger of repeating the stereotype, yeah, because in what Nia's arguing here is that if you became a diplomat,
Yeah.
you'd be a Kling,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
As well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So again, don't forget that, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so if you became, Elon Musk, you would be a Kling,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because that's what Kalinga meant.
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
right?
so-
Is that to prosperous, successful,
yeah.
enterprising, global.
So that means it's very complex how that skin color can be different things in different time in the context of Indonesia compared to that fixed terminology of skin color in the US, for instance. That is my point. Yeah, thank you so much.
I think there is something is implicitly not said over there. In Indonesia, when you say word keling, they understand it is black. Keling, right? That's all. For Indonesian society, when you hear the word keling, that's all. The content of that word is black. But for Malaysia, there are some more negativity, some more vocabularies that filled into that word. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he said it is not really linked to color, but social class. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's how the surface of the knowledge about what keling is so far. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's all for me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your presence and congratulating again Dr. Nia Deliana for her wonderful books. Selamat. Selamat. And then this is, I think this was taught in Malaysia, Indonesia, written in Indonesia and somewhere else, probably in Istanbul as well and anywhere, and published in Malaysia. So this is also the history of traveling, materiality, people, etc. Okay, thank you again. And those who ask questions, please you get your books and then make selfie for instance. But again, thank you. See you again in the next book forum.